Hello and welcome to another episode of Alaska Commercial Real Estate. Today, this is a special episode and not short bus special, but end of the quarter special. The end of the quarter special show. This week, we will be bringing a wrap up of the first quarter of 2023 commercial real estate sales and movement in the state of Alaska, covering the major markets, or at least the only ones that matter in the state of Alaska. And by the only ones that matter, I do mean things outside of Anchorage.
Well, I mean, Anchorage is the center of the world, right? I mean,
that's what they think. So I am your host, Phil, and joining me is Alaskan economist and commercial real estate appraiser, Lydia.
Good morning.
So recap the first quarter of 2023 in Alaska. What special happened here?
Let's see. So first quarter sales in the municipality of Anchorage, 13 closed sales.
I thought we weren't going to start with Anchorage.
Well, it's the top of the MLS
See,
listings.
the thing is, Anchorage starts with an A.
Yeah.
So
they are the first group in the MLS drop-down menu.
They are. So they win.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we've got the Kenai Peninsula Borough, 8 sales.
8 sales.
Mat-Su Borough, 4 sales.
Oh.
And the Fairbanks North Star Borough, 5.
Commercial sales.
Commercial sales.
I realize
first quarter.
More than 5 of you sold your house in Fairbanks. We're talking about commercial sales. The commercial sales that were on the market.
Closed sales.
Yeah. Closed
Within the quarter.
Not like certain restaurants in Soldotna that go pending every 3 to 6 months and never actually close.
Right.
Yeah.
So out of that, though, the total transaction volume is significant.
There's the crux. So how many millions of dollars did we sell in commercial real estate?
Anchorage, over 18 million.
18 million. One property.
And Kenai Borough, 6.5 million.
Woohoo.
Mat-Su Borough, 1.8, and that's plus because one sale did not record their sales list transaction.
Well, was
price.
It a significant property? Should we call them out? Which one? Who didn't disclose their sale in MLS?
Right. So that's 1.8 plus in Mat-Su Borough, and then Fairbanks North Star Borough was 2.6.
1.8 plus $10.
Yeah.
Yes, it recorded at $10. So. All right. So, meager
yes
entry into 2023. The thing is, speaking about that, that's kind of a normal year. Winter sales are not usually significant in these markets. We don't see a lot of large movement happen in the first quarter of a year. Last year was very different, and we've had lots of years in Alaska of very hot movements, hot or cold, not a lot of stagnation. And this is kind of more of a normal year. With all that said, well, I mean, maybe we get to that later, but I don't know that there's a lot of promise that the normalcy will continue. Are things going to happen good? Are things going to happen bad? What's 2, 3, and 4 going to look like?
Right.
That's the real question, is what's going to happen. And I have my thoughts and opinions on that. I'd probably better placed later in the show. But okay, so that's the total volume of commercial real estate movement and recorded MLS listing, transactions. Not a lot of sales in itself, but anything of prominence in there? Anything stick out?
No, I mean, some of the listings in the Kenai Borough, of course, are cabins type properties that are.
Well, yeah. So is that something you looked at or noticed in the statistics compiling for the show? What are the types of properties?
Oh, well, they range the gambit, of course, but given the transaction volume being so high, they're larger, a lot of larger properties this time around.
Okay.
It's as far
Northway Mall has not sold yet,
right?
So we're not seeing. What you're saying is there's not any particular trend of this type of property is all selling or not selling, or
no, it's. Too soon to really see that kind of trend. I mean, you can kind of start to see it in the listings, the active listings. So
what type of property in the active listings is starting to trend?
Well, we're seeing a large increase in space available for lease in the Anchorage market.
Office space.
It's last week over 2 million square feet available for lease.
Right. That was a significant statistic if you watched the show last week and the ticker that runs down here.
So it's that kind of is what we're seeing in the active for sale as well.
Right. But not sold.
Not sold.
And we don't really follow. So MLS is not the greatest source of closed leases.
Correct.
So a lot of things get, listed to add to the marketability, the exposure.
Right.
But they don't necessarily record. And of the leases that do record, my experience and probably yours, you can speak to your own experience. The numbers that they record at are usually wrong. They don't get recorded accurately. So if you're wondering, those of you who are in charge of recording and writing down what that lease closed at, we all know that most of you are lying. When we check up, because we actually do check to confirm those statistics, and we find out that most of the time what you recorded was not true, and we put the true thing down. So you could stop lying. It'd be
in any market, the best example of lease.
Our own 3 leases, only one actually recorded accurately, and those are the ones that
it's in the Anchorage market. There's just more activity, so there's more transactions showing up on MLS. In smaller markets, they tend to not be listed at all, or if they are, they're not closed out properly, like you said.
That's a nice way of saying it. Okay, so what else statistically is important, or what should we note or talk about as the end of the first quarter, beginning of 2023?
Oh, days of market, if in most areas are about the same. We see over a year, though, of days on market for Kenai Peninsula properties.
Commercial properties on the Kenai Peninsula on average are taking more than 12 months exposure time in order to move. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Again, indicators of a potential return to normalcy. That's a normal Kenai Peninsula market.
And, of course, this is a small sample, so it could be skewed by just one.
The fact that it only includes 3 months of data.
And it could be just one that really skews this because it was on the market for 3 years. But it's something to keep an eye on as we start to see more listings come available.
Okay.
We do have monitored quite a few properties that are approaching kind of that 9-month mark of listing in the Kenai Peninsula Borough. So it's
so there's a potential by statistical analysis that some of these properties should maybe sell in the next quarter.
Yes, I mean statistically. And again, it's a small sample of sales right here, but
here's the deal. Properties in Alaska do tend to sell in the second quarter. So, they tend to go penned in the second quarter.
Right.
And they tend to close in the third quarter.
We're starting to see activity pick up.
Right.
As far as transactions. So, the second quarter for Alaska is kind of the things start moving in construction, and transactions start to happen.
Yeah. And in our own office, we have, I think 2 jobs right now that we're actively working on that are getting money for the coming construction season. They have big renovations or, plans. So there's 2 of those at least.
Right.
Both of them are both on the Kenai Peninsula right now, or is there one up? I can't remember. I know we've got a couple that we're working on outside of the normal markets. So I'm just not seeing the volume that, on the bidding side of the house. So as I'm drafting these contracts and working on the schedule for our office in the next quarter, I'm not seeing the level of volume that we have been seeing for the last 2 years or so.
Right.
So, what's it going to look like? I don't know. That's a big, I don't know yet, but, the good news is it's not dead. So there was some worry that, potentially nothing would happen this year.
Right.
There's certainly a lot of people very annoyed and pissed off at the raise in interest rates. And I know that going into the fall, we had more than 2 bankers personally conveying their worry about what was going to happen.
Sure.
And, 1 over the winter and 2 in the coming year.
Yes.
So, I don't know if they're still worried or not. We tend to travel around and visit with these bankers in the second quarter. So, those plans are coming into place and be happening soon. I'm not real sure what their outlook is on things, but we are seeing some bid requests trickle in from them. And again, what seems to be prevalent in Alaska, and this is also present in our, kindred in businesses in the lesser 49, is that there's just an awful lot of work in divorce litigation.
Yes.
So
that in the past 3 years, it's been the case.
Make up with your spouses and quit getting divorced, or don't. It makes us a lot of money. It's really not fun doing that work because
it's not. No, it's always ugly and unfortunate for the family as a whole. So.
Yeah. One call today was about the second or third. Some more, we saw this work last year in the fall, a lot of estate settling again. Yes. So we're still seeing some estate settlement cleanup. I wish there was a way that, you could tell people that it's really somewhat expensive to settle an estate when someone dies and there's a lot of commercial property involved. Unfortunately, there's requirements to get that valued. Yeah. And for many people, the person that died might have been used to what it costs to appraise commercial real estate, but the survivors don't seem to be.
Right.
So
then if we look back at some of the information we shared before about our senior population.
Oh yeah. Jump
growing,
into that. That's a good segue.
This might be a continued trend. We spoke before about how the increase in senior population in Alaska is going to affect real estate. One of the ways it's going to affect real estate is more state
the deaths
sales, as well as the type of property that are being sold. Single family homes that are, those sellers won't transition into buyers, so they're going to be leaving the market essentially. So there's potential for a lot of inventory to come available.
Well, that's good news if you're in the acquiring side of things, right? The building up side, which I guess this is what we're saying. Statistically, there's less of them doing that. If you're an investor, and that is not over 70. So if you're an investor that is still in the accumulating side of your investment life, there's promise.
Yes.
In inventory going up, prices should come down.
Right.
Prices should come down. We are seeing prices quiver. We're not seeing prices necessarily diving yet. So be patient. is my advice is be patient. My advice there is be patient. And on top of that, being patient, keep your eyes open for assumable loans. If you're going to move into that, try to assume some low interest loans. It's not something that's been a part of our marketplace for quite a while because interest rates have been stupidly low for a very long time now. And so the new generation of investors that are still in the acquiring phase have not necessarily been investors in an assumable loan time period. So that's something to look into.
That's one thing to look at. First, the interim use of real estate potentially changing. I mean, we see it in the residential side, but also in senior housing, which has been an area that Alaska's tried to grow.
Right. We know our history is aging. We know that more people, the demand is coming for more senior housing. And some people have been trying to get ahead of that.
Right. So the states, we just spoke about the state program that allows individuals to convert their homes into a
assisted living type.
It's essentially a senior housing type situation. Communal living is really what it is. And, there's favorable financing for those things and, kind of a program to allow that to happen. So there's potential for a lot of shifts in the commercial real estate market for Alaska here in the next 10 years. As we see, they're saying 30,000 more seniors.
70
seniors over 75 years old.
75.
So that's a significant increase. And again, typically that would be the age bracket where they're selling assets and not acquiring assets.
Typically.
So
hard to say because the generation that is hitting that is go their own way generation. They certainly have always done things different than the generations historically before and after.
So there's potential to see, growth in healthcare, especially for Alaska, and growth in
above where we've already grown to, because we kind of did this thing already. So,
Well, Alaska has always been behind the curve when it comes to specialized healthcare services. We typically have, a state or local government run hospital system, but then the specialty services.
We're not behind the curve. We're just pulling rear security.
Yeah. So the specialty services where Alaska's always lacked and still do, a majority of patients have to leave Alaska for care. So it's something that a lot of banks have started to kind of try to capitalize on that growth, especially in the Anchorage area where there's a lot of construction happening of new medical space. But that has slowed in the past year or two, just because they kind of got ahead of the demand, I think, in a little ways. So
okay, all right, well. We've known it was coming. We've said it was coming. We've written articles about it coming. We've all tried to prepare for it coming. It's still coming. There's a big wave of old people coming.
Well, it's Alaska's actually leading the charge.
We're aging out
in this in the nation. So it's something that it will have an effect on real estate. It's a matter of what it will look like, but.
What it looks like is that the face changes. So, the way that real estate changes then in this is that it's just a demand for different types of real estate or uses change. Demand for types of construction, right? Characteristics of the buildings. Demand for commercial spaces that have elevators change. Demand for single story.
Yes, exactly.
Accessible properties.
We've seen that already in the local area.
Restaurants start to flourish when they have enough room for walkers to get around between. Yes. I mean, these are practical things.
And open between 12 and 2.
Right. So, not 2 a.m.
Yes, all of that.
That's what we're saying. So the characteristics for success in how you build out, advertise, right?
Right.
In other words, it's going to affect the highest and best use.
Of course.
So, all right, good. What else?
We talked a lot about commercial buildings all over the state, but in Anchorage, we've seen the problems with these buildings built in the 70s and to 80s time frame.
Well, some of us have been pointing out the problems in these buildings for a long time.
Right.
And I didn't really want to be right, but
I know.
I'm tired of telling banks, this place is getting ready to fall down. And the bank says, no, I think it's just water in the corner.
Yeah.
Wasn't water.
Yeah.
And then it happens.
Yes.
So
we did see some of that come to pass with this several roof collapses across the state, and they all seem to be in that kind of age range of construction.
Right.
Similar type truss.
Which led the speculation
builds,
that potentially it was a building construction problem.
Correct.
Instead of the reality of, regardless of the construction type, it really is an age and lack of maintenance problem.
Yes.
It's the fact that it's a property of that age has been through this many over 7.0 earthquakes and has not been actually analyzed by a structural engineer, nor solved any of the damage that happens. And you can only have structural cracks for so long before they fail.
So, I mean, that's, something we've pointed out numerous times, and we continue to see where we're getting these properties that are getting to the end of their, not just their useful life, but their economic life, where
their life on a whole, like they're getting ready to undertake this transition into the final stage where the highest and best use is kindling.
Yes. So that's, something that we keep an eye out for, and investors that are looking at properties should definitely be looking at.
Right. No sources of sparks.
Right.
Lots of fire
Northway Mall being one that is
good example
for purchase. And a very big question about that property, though, is what is the highest and best use of that property?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you were to drive $100,000 boat into there, it might be worth more than $100,000. I did see what they were listing it for, and now I'm not surprised that they're not getting any action. Yeah. But especially since they just had a roof collapse.
But, and that's not just that, that's one example, but there's other examples of very dated properties. And like in Fairbanks, we talked about the Polaris building.
Right.
It's been closed for 23 years and
condemned for
almost as long. And, they're finally getting to the point where they can.
It takes a lot for a property to get condemned in Alaska.
To be removed.
It's not something that happens very often.
So, yeah, it's been sitting there a very long time.
I mean, we've been in some places, like a place that used to sell furniture in Kenai, and that place is not condemned somehow. I don't know.
Right. So it took a lot to get there. It took a lot for the federal funds.
They can't keep tenants that don't even have to pay rent anymore. It's that far gone.
Right. But they're, it's.
The city's going to get involved soon.
It's not a small amount of properties. If you look at
I'm starting to wonder if that mall, if they're not just going to put like a bunch of airbags on that roof that's collapsing and just have it be like a spot to catch planes. 'Cause it's right off the end of the runway, and like it'll just be an engine out recovery. It's kind of like, on the highways where they have the runaway truck ramps. We'll just put a bunch of airbags on top of that, falling apart mall and catch airplanes just in case. There you go. That's a good highest and best use.
Sure. Anyway, there's more properties like that than you realize. I think it's the boom of Alaska was that time frame. So
I don't know. Every time we go for a long drive across Alaska, we see lots and lots of properties that are like that.
Yes,
I don't know if it's just that I think I do know what it is. I mean, when we end up getting involved inevitably in this type of property, what we find is that it is owned by someone who no longer lives in the state, left a long time ago, or inherited it from somebody, and the key is that the person who actually owns the property hasn't been there in sometimes decades. And it's just another indicator of just how many people are leaving Alaska. So a lot of our major property owners have had children who left the state and never came back. And so they still kind of hold these properties because they can't move them. One, for lots of reasons, which we talk about on the show all the time. But a lot of properties in this beyond useful life.
Yes.
Ready to be raised.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting in the next few years here. The number of properties that potentially could be, the best use is to tear down and rebuild.
Yep.
The issue,
building costs are coming down again. So the trends in the cost of construction are in the right direction.
Yes. The issue is that land values are not increased to, dramatically enough to the point where that, makes it a viable option. Where you start to see the tip of the scale happening is when your land values.
But how much land value in Alaska, especially typical Alaska, is really just brought in a truck?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the value is nothing until you trucked it in.
Sure. So, I mean, that's in small markets, which there are many in Alaska. Land is plentiful and land is available, and there's not been this scarcity to push land values high enough that the highest and best use is to raise.
Outside of the bowl, outside of Anchorage.
Outside of Anchorage, yes.
In some cases, I wouldn't say Wasilla, but like the central part of the Palmer-Wasilla area and that corridor is starting to get a little skinny in available lands, at least along already built out infrastructure. The cost of developing when you have to stretch the roads is different than existing ready to build or build to suit stuff along already built up highways. So it's not gone yet. And as you say, there is still land available. There's still room for expansion development. If you wanted to put a big box somewhere, there's still places to do it. But it's getting there. It's getting there. So
I think this is the crucial point.
Seward
of
pretty full.
Right. It's a crucial point of where we'll see this kind of transition or change. Now, and that's if we're going to see years of growth. I think the forecast really is based on our population decline that we spoke about. And the employment recovery not really happening in the past few years. Since our 2020 blip there.
No, the availability for employment in Alaska is really not in skilled things, skilled labor.
So we've had actually negative employment growth from 2015 to 2021.
Yeah.
So it's the outlook for Alaska is not really growth.
No, there's a lot of concerns.
There's
migration's bad. What are the migration statistics?
So
I know you've got a lot of that information.
Our net migration has been negative for the past 10 years.
Yeah, a while.
And natural increase, which is births minus deaths, has also been the lowest.
I would say, did you mean natural decrease?
A natural, you're right.
The natural decrease.
The natural, So it's supposed to be an increase because you're supposed to be having more births than deaths. And unfortunately, we've been having kind of the opposite happen. It's a concern. It's a legitimate concern because even just our natural population is not increasing.
Negative in all categories.
Yes.
It's not negative and negative makes positive. It's negative. It's still negative. It's all negative.
So as you look at this trend over years, it becomes quite concerning and
disconcerting.
Also contributes to the state of Alaska's fiscal problems and issues that they have within funding our services for the state.
Yeah, we seem to have a very difficult time getting things through the federal approval process. And unfortunately, there is a group of sort of anti-growth. I mean, I have personal opinions about what they're for, which, we don't need to get into, but there are groups of people in Alaska, and for the most part, they're not from here, but they're here, and they fight very hard to stop growth and stop progress. And, healthy levels of pushback are important so that we maintain our growth in healthy ways. We don't want to monumentally grow in unhealthy and damaging ways, but that's not what's happening. And nor do I think that's bad. What's happening is this fight every move, and they fight it in a way that costs everyone so much money that it becomes no longer feasible,
right.
And then they give up.
Right.
And so rather than just fighting it through what would be honorable means, as in checks and balances, and let's make sure we do things the best way, that's not what's happening, because there's an agenda that is being served. And what's happening is fight it tooth and nail so it's no longer economically feasible. And so then it just doesn't happen and people give up. And especially in the case of major investment dollars. So an example being oil development, but it could be others, mining or whatever. And it's not just that. I mean, the agriculture, same thing, being fought as well. We can't get growth in these industries, which would help Alaska,
right,
because there are persons that are very effective at fighting things in court, and they drive the cost so high that it just never happens.
Which is why Alaska's banking on tourism. And this is why we are expecting
such a losing battle.
1.3 million visitors.
Tourism
in this next year
is companies that are not owned by Alaska, utilizing employees that are not Alaskans, and it's all this money that just kind of filters straight through, and very little of it stays here.
Well, this is a strong argument for sales tax, which is what the state is looking at right now, is a statewide sales tax, which would capture the out-of-state spending that we have.
Well, mark the calendar that I would ever support some sort of new tax, but the argument is strong. There are reasons.
So, and if you look at it from the perspective of we're looking at, approaching that 2 million visitor mark.
Can we just tax Canadians when they visit? They're already used to it.
Yeah. So we're looking at, they're expecting that to be kind of to prop up the falling economy here, is that tourism is going to be, for one, this year, better than it has been in the past 3 years, but even better than 2019. They're expecting
I don't understand these forecasts. I've read them, not as extensively as you have. It's difficult for me to agree with the forecast of tourism levels this year that they're all saying.
No, yeah.
When I look at global happenings, and even just North American political happenings, and the costs of fuel and the inflation things that are happening right now, and just cost of living increases for everyone who exists, it's hard for me to agree with the tourism forecasts that are being thrown out there.
Right.
I want them to be true.
Well, we're betting pretty hard on it.
That's what's dangerous to me. The
infrastructure that we talked about that's happening in the ports to accommodate these mega cruise ships. This is not a small undertaking.
No.
For a lot of these areas, it's
towns like Skagway are heavily invested in this gamble.
Right.
But it is a build it so they'll come.
It is
situation. If you don't build it, they won't come. So if you don't try, the answer is no matter what.
Right. Ketchikan this season is looking at having 5 of these ships appear and be in the area at one time. And if you're talking about each one of those ships being 5,000 people, that is a huge
I would just say prepare for 4,999 of those people to be broke, because all they had was the cruise ship thing. And are they really going to have enough money left to come around the shops.
reality of it is that they do want to spend. And so that's what these small little communities are hoping is they're going to capture is this spending, the restaurants and the gifts and
we all want it to happen,
the excursions and everything. But
no one wants tourism success more than me.
Right. And so it does, though, depend on, the cost of international goods like oil and gas and, the cost of travel being affected because
none of these ships are nuclear powered.
Right. So when, airline costs go up because gas prices and, oil costs have gone up, it affects tourism.
They don't run on moose farts.
Right. So, everyone's optimistic, and which is great. And I think it's a positive thing for Alaska, and the infrastructure stuff is happening, which is a positive for Alaska, but it's yet to be seen. This is still an unknown. 2022 did not get back up to 2019 levels. 2023, they're expecting it to be that. And
we'll see.
We will see. Again, this is one of the three legs of the stool that supports Alaska's economy. And I think a lot of the hope and wishes are placed on this tourism being a big one for us this year.
Yep. So, what else? Again, we're just kind of recapping the stories of the quarter. And we hit on the market and we've talked about, again, kind of recapping some of the important things that have happened. We'd be remiss to not mention the fact that interest rates have, as expected, gone up. Please understand the forecast for the second quarter is they will continue to go up. Probably, I think both of our predictions, I'll speak for myself. I would say expect quarter increments each time now. I don't think we'll go above a quarter. It's time to slow. There was a rapid and then, now it's a little bit slower. So I would expect it to be a quarter.
Right.
And I don't have the schedule in front of me. It is printed. It's not hard to find. It's on the Fed's website. But it's roughly every 5 to 6 weeks. Is that about right? Or it's not quite
something
monthly,
like that. Yeah.
Is it? So do you disagree that it'll be a quarter?
I
think there'll be any
we're
zeros?
Looking at that, yeah. Where I think they have a benchmark that they hope to hit this year, and I think once they get there,
I thought the idea was at the end of the year.
Yeah,
so.
Once they get to that benchmark, I think they're gonna kind of reassess. But I think the expectation is that they didn't respond. First, they didn't respond in time to kind of negate this inflation that we've had.
Right. Some of this pain was preventable.
Right. And that they may have had a bit of knee-jerk reaction too quick, too soon.
There's a lot of political pressure.
So that's...
And pandemic pressure,
exactly.
to be fair.
So we're keeping an eye on that. And, of course, all the local lenders are as well.
Right. And on top of that, there's not an intelligent person out there that is not predicting some sort of reset in values. Now, how extreme or how quick or, that we all differ on.
Right.
Which just means we don't know. But values are not going to continue to climb in a measurable way. So there's a lot of things that go into that. The value of the money also affects the property values. So I don't think we're going to see drastic changes. I think we're in a slow change mode, which is good. Like slower change is a more predictable life, right? A pace of life. Let's not have this go one way up or down. Let's have some more predictable growth. Let's, get back to having healthy families again and healthy, work-life relationships and all that.
Right.
Let's get away from this drastic up and drastic down and extremes and pressure and stress. And, let's have some healthier business atmospheres and some healthier work-life atmospheres.
I think I'm hoping that the federal move to work on infrastructure across the country will happen That's a key component.
Well, they took the money.
It's the aging infrastructure, highways and ferry systems, and
A lot of concern there.
that are bridges that really just need overhaul. And Alaska's part of that.
Train derailments, and
right.
There's a lot of bad things happening.
I think it's time for us to focus on the country and work on what we need to be a functioning and, growth centered economy.
Okay. Well, we'll see if any of that's going to happen. What else do you have? Do you have any other notes written down?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on all of it. There are a lot of projects happening, infrastructure projects that are in the works that would be beneficial for Alaska. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
But again, this exodus of the working population from Alaska is of concern.
I'll take slow and steady over boom and bust.
Sure.
Any day.
So maybe we can attract the working population back. If we can get some of these projects going and get some of this momentum happening.
Okay. Well, we shall see. It's only the first quarter. With that said, we talked off camera before we started the show this week about what appraisal concept. We're not taking an Ask a Question this week. We decided, to kind of recap again. This is a special episode as we recap the first quarter of 2023. And one of the recurring themes in not just the events that we talked about today and recapped on the show today, but over the last 3 months has been the basics or foundational concepts of appraisal when it comes to appraising real estate and commercial real estate in Alaska, and not just in Alaska, but nationwide. The foundations continue to lie in highest and best use analysis. And we beat that drum all the time, and we try to explain to clients, and, why does everything cost so much? Well, highest and best use doesn't just happen. So,
right.
Let's talk about, once again, a little bit on highest and best use. Explain the overarching, what does it mean? What is that? And, maybe what are like the components that go into highest and best use?
Right. So at the beginning of an assignment, the highest and best use must be determined for the property in order to then move into your analysis of value.
Right.
The highest and best use to companies encompasses 4 kind of sections, areas that you need to look at. One of them is the legally permissible use of the property. And a lot of that has to do with zoning, local.
Right. All the things that we ignore in Alaska.
Right.
So we don't worry about legally permissible in Alaska.
Right. So, and that can include, CC&Rs and other things, but most of the time it's your zoning.
It's your zoning. It's your, well, in some cases, building code.
Right.
So setbacks,
yes.
Zoning, and, you can't build a 20,000 square foot mall on something that's not large enough.
Well, that gets into the physically possible.
All right. Well, then I'll shut up. You just
so legally permissible refers to, the governmental controls that are applied to.
What I was trying to get at was like the handicap. So
okay. So we'll talk about that next. But
all right, you do it.
So after the legally permissible, once you've determined if there are any kind of government entities that can say what you can build or not build.
Type of use.
Yes.
Okay.
So in some areas it's very, very strict. In some areas it's not so much. So sometimes it may be you can do whatever. But after that step, you look at what's physically possible, and that would be building a mall on a site that's
not big enough for a mall.
Right. Correct. Yeah. So then it's, can you physically build this large structure or what this
Can you
use
put 100-story something on the approach end of a runway?
Of course, yeah.
Right.
So those kinds of things is a physically possible.
Yeah.
The next step would be what is financially feasible. And that can be a very in-depth analysis depending on what the appraiser deems necessary or what you and the client would like to see. sometimes of these level C analysis where you get into the supply and demand, and that can get very detailed.
I'm thinking along the lines of like, I want to build a car wash on a property, but I don't have access to, or it'll never happen, or perhaps the costs are prohibitive in order to spread water and sewer to the property. And so now I'm looking at a well or trucking, and maybe I'm in a location where I can only truck in water, or we have to drill a well, but is it possible to even reach water? Is there water of sufficient abundance and quantity to run the car wash? Right. So those aspects start to come into that.
That's financially feasible.
Financial and physically, right? So that's a mixture of the two now.
Sure.
So especially, big deal for us is you want to build something large that has a large consumption of something that has to be stretched from the nearest city. And then what is the cost associated with doing that? Or you don't even need to be large. I just want to build a coffee shack, but I need it to run off of electricity. And if you happen to be on the Kenai Peninsula, there's only one source of a public electricity, and they excel at making the costs of connection be not financially feasible.
Right. So those kinds of things, especially when you're talking about vacant land.
We hinder the growth. Or I want to do an internet cafe, a gaming center, and it requires a whole lot of internet and bandwidth. But I'm stuck having to use a company like GCI or ACS, and so it's just not possible. Yeah. Because they just can't deliver it. So
those kinds of things, they definitely play into financially feasible, which segues into the maximally productive.
There you go. How are we going to make money at this?
Right. So there's a lot of things that the appraiser looks at in all of this, and especially in vacant land. So we talked about this before about vacant land.
Well, who's an appraiser to tell me what to do on my property?
Right. So
you're not very well liked at all.
Yeah, it's certainly, though, it's something that you can discuss with your appraiser. And why do they determine their highest and best use to be this?
I think this dry cleaner / pizza shop would make a perfect shooting range. And so I'm just going to build this shooting range right in the middle of the city.
So it's something that you can discuss. Of course, it is the appraiser's obligation to determine the highest and best use. That is part of.
But why? So let's bring it home here for a lot of people that are struggling with who's an appraiser to tell me what to do with this property, right? I get that maybe maybe you aren't qualified, but I have a dream. The whole point is, how are you going to value my dream, right? You got to start with the highest and best use,
right?
In order to do what, so that you can do what, right? With the value, how are you going to value property, right?
Right. So the determination of the highest and best use directly translates to how you develop the purchase to value,
right?
And it is then also from that determines the value conclusion of the property based on how.
Because don't you just take a list of things that are actively for sale and pick the highest listing price, and then isn't that the value?
As a real estate agent, sure. I would do that.
That is what a broker's price opinion is.
I would do that, sure.
And I realize a lot of people are listening and saying, what's wrong with that? Loan officer would agree.
Sure. And you could look at it that way.
Yeah. And if I'm selling my property, it seems like a great way to go.
Right. So I think an example is especially in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, where we saw everybody wanting to develop their 160 acre parcel into a subdivision.
Yes.
So we had a client come to us and said they didn't even want to develop this. They wanted to just sell paper lots, which is
come up with a plan, sell the plan.
So basically I'll sketch it out, but then I'm just going to sell them off and everybody has to figure it out for themselves. It's what it comes to.
Well, they needed you to rubber stamp the deal to say that that is actually feasible.
Right. So they came to me and said, hey, I want to sell all these lots and I don't want to put any money into it. I just want to.
What did you say it was 23 years ago?
Not quite that long.
25 years
ago? No. Anyway, so, and honestly, that wasn't the highest and best use for that property. And unfortunately, we did tell the client.
Was this the timber one?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the time where we told the client the highest and best use is to sell the trees.
Well, he told, but I remember this now. He was very excited because recently announced in his community was a new medical school.
Yes.
And he was under the impression all he heard was medical school.
Who would buy houses that are
Sure.
$500,000.
When we, he hired us. So we went and we did the market analysis. And
Yes.
Gosh, we had to fly down there a couple of times.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I remember because it was a sketchy runway to land into. And luckily we had available at that time, we had an airplane that could get into that really short strip. And overfly the property, which is how you were able to see like what was.
It was a hill.
It was a straight up mountain.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to kind of low fly over the peak and around it and see the characteristics and topography because we never could have hiked and nor could you have seen that from the ground hiking the property. But anyway, back to he was excited because he didn't know better. The type of medical school that was being produced was not medical doctor school in the sense of what most of us think of as medical school of medicine. It was a kind of homeopathic, different deal, like healing crystals type thing. Not the same kind of student, not the same type of professional, not the same kind of money.
Right.
And so the market just wasn't there for what he wanted to do. Unfortunately. I just remember they took a really long time to pay us. I don't think.
Well, no. So interesting enough, he did not give us the final payment for that product.
It wasn't interesting at all.
But months later, we did receive a check.
Wow.
And the check came from a timber company.
Because somebody knows how to put a lien on a property.
And the timber company, hey, guess what?
If you don't pay your bills with us, you'll probably end up with a lien on your property.
The timber company used that property to harvest trees, which coincidentally was the conclusion of my highest and best use.
You continue to be right, like all the time. I have bet a lot of money on you being right lots of times. That is
one of my best examples of highest and best use because it shows.
Well, because it was extreme. And I agree with you and him that at face value, certainly when you drove by the property, you never would have looked at it and said, well, that a proposed housing division, especially of the type he was looking at, it was a great idea. It was innovative. It was creative.
He was trying to think outside the box. That is true.
I wanted it to work for him.
Yeah. He was trying to assess where demand was going to come from in the future. And this is what developers do. And this is their role is to assess.
Well, and he may be right in 200 years.
Right. But this is the difference between this is my dream, like you said, and the reality of, well, these students are not going to be buying $500,000 homes and they're not going to. And they're not going to be buying these lots.
I wanted hard for his dream to be reality and be feasible. And we looked hard at other markets of like, let's try to think of what other industries could support your dream. Let's try real hard at the existing population and the existing growth patterns and what's aging out and what's changing and what's, and there just was no way.
No,
not in 100 years. So,
unfortunately,
good example of, and so, had you gone about, this is what I was driving at, had you gone about the assignment incorrectly in that you didn't start with highest and best use and feasibility analysis, had you just immediately gone out and looked for comparables of what was being proposed and valued it that way, you would have been grossly incorrect. You would have cost him millions of dollars and it would have ultimately failed. So you would have been wrong in how you did it while being right about the value at that proposed use.
You could have lied. You're taking a lot of assumptions into that, though. I mean,
well, that's what you do when you don't start the right way.
The math wasn't there. The math was not there to support it. That's part of the issue as well, was that there was not sales to support what he was doing. So therefore the number would be
always an indicator that potentially your highest and best use is off, is if you're having to force a lot of assumptions to make it work.
So if I had said, oh, sure, they're selling lots for $200,000, which they were not.
No, not even.
If I had made up the data to support it.
It wasn't Anchorage Hillside.
The data was just not there. So the numbers were always going to be negative anyway.
Yeah.
So, but especially in subdivision analysis, when you're doing a discounted cash flow, which is predicting the future income and
but then
discounting it
to find the proper comparables to use, whether they're lease comparables or cost comparables or whatever the comparables are, to do your 3 approaches to value, you have to be using the correct comparables. And that comes from highest and best use.
Right. And in this case, the comparables weren't there, which is another indicator.
Well, in the proposed use, the comparables,
best uses
there was plenty of comparables for timber sales.
Well, that's exactly why.
So when you did the highest and best use,
right,
and you used comparables that were of the appropriate use, all the information was there to do the assignment,
of course,
properly. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, because the fundamental point or purpose of the highest and best use analysis is to determine the use that results in the highest probable value of the property.
Well, let's just remove probable.
So, anyway, so in the case of sort of making up the data, there's
appraisers that can be bought. If you'd like a list of them, I won't give them to you, but they're not hard to find.
You know, in the selection or looking at the market, this is what the appraiser does. They're looking at the market to say, okay, what's happening here? Are there these types of homes being purchased, 1, and built? Or, 2, are these lots being sold that, high-end homes, luxury home lots, with a view and all these amenities. And then if not, then why? And then 2, if not, what is being sold and what is happening in this market? And in this case, timber was happening. And in particular, this property had road access and was easily accessible and had plentiful timber. And it was, that was the conclusion of the highest and best use.
So, to wrap up highest and best use, the point is, in order to properly analyze where a property fits into a certain market or even determine which market segment it fits into at all, a highest and best use analysis must be conducted. It is foundational in the appraisal process. It is one of the first things that appraisers are taught how to do right after their ethics and, basics of definitions. You get some definitions, you get some ethics, the standards of professional practice, and then from there you roll into highest and best use, at least at the minimal level, so that you even understand where to start looking for comparables and, how to get the start process. But it is at the basic part. And if you look at every appraisal, sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's not, but there is a highest and best use analysis that is done. In a lot of residentials, it'll talk about, what's the line? It's like a little blip and it just says, basically, is the highest and best use the current use or not?
Right.
So, because, once you check that box, then it's like the rest can be done. But if the box is no, the whole thing's over.
Right.
So, if any of that is confusing to you, well, then you're not the only one. But clearly, I get the 4 areas kind of mixed together too, because many of them do overlap.
They do.
So,
yes.
But yeah, that's why you need to hire an expert that is not just trained, but has a lot of experience.
Right. You need someone who knows the market and can recognize the key components to value, which are part of the highest and best use analysis.
Otherwise, everything else is off. The comparables they're using are wrong. The types of comparables, even the types of approach or analysis to apply will be incorrect. So make sure that the highest and best use analysis is done correctly by a qualified person, and that'll set you up for success from there. In many ways, once you've determined what types of comparables to choose from, that becomes the easy part.
Right.
It's the getting past the foundations there.
Yes, exactly.
So, which is a lot of why land is so difficult to value.
Yes.
Plus, you don't get a lot of alternative approaches to apply typically. You're kind of stuck in your single approach, and single approaches are dangerous in real estate. So there's no rooms for checks and balances to catch errors. So, all right. And with that, I guess we're going to wrap for this week. We talked about first quarter numbers in Alaska markets and sales and overall, what would we say? So the outlook for Q2 in Alaska is what? Good, bad, more the same, typical year, not? What do you think? What do you say?
I'd say slow and steady is what we're seeing, and I think that's going to continue.
Slow, steady growth.
Slow, steady movement in the market, I'd say.
I predict slow, steady, equal. I don't think values are going to go up. I don't think values are going to go measurably down in Q2. And I think we'll see slow, steady activity.
Yes,
I agree. Slow, steady activity with values remaining at or above an equilibrium of moderate predictability.
Right. We're seeing discounts and things happening. So
there are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are still some closed sales that are happening at or near reasonable asking prices, not the throw spaghetti at the wall 5 times the value. That is over. Thank God. That was not healthy for anybody. So, and then let's see what else. So that's kind of that's our predictor for Q2. And you saw the results of Q1. We'll be back next week with our normal recorded show and back towards what's new. What do we have on the table for next week? What are we researching?
The top 100 in corporate entities of Alaska.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Alaska Business has released some interesting lists, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. Great. So that's what we're working on for you for next week. Until next week, if you have any questions for the show, starting next week, we'll take the Ask an Appraiser question segment again. So we haven't picked out what's going to happen yet. If you want to get in on that, there's still time. Send an email to show, SHOW, at akcretoday.com, and we'll put that up right there. Here. So that's where it's going to be. You can send an email and possibly be on your show. We also have space that if someone would like to do a call in, we can stump the chump with Lydia, the Alaska Economist, and see what kind of crazy faces she makes when we ask her questions that we didn't prep her for. That would be fun. I would have fun with that. So maybe we'll do that, but you're going to have to, send an email to the show if you'd like to be a part of that. With that said, thank you so much for joining us. All is not doom and gloom.
No.
Breakup is here. Spring is right around the corner. Get ready, get your sleep, because Alaska is waking up. So we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.